Many times I found myself overwhelmed and unprepared to handle her difficult emotions. During a time that we were supposed to be connecting and enjoying our family, she was experiencing a variety of disappointments. And I didn't always know how to respond to that, especially as my own emotions were raw and I was dealing with quite a few disappointments of my own.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey there. Welcome to episode 71. We are so excited that you're here with us today as we are all experiencing this holiday week. And hopefully you're excited. And we're going to talk about a little bit of maybe apprehension as well. But we'll get into that in a few minutes. Hey, if you have not hit the subscribe button, we would love for you to do that so that you don't miss any episodes that are upcoming. And especially as we head into the new year, we've got some great things planned and excited about how we're going to help you and support you through this blended family journey. And while you're hitting subscribe, if you would be willing to give us a rating, wherever you would like to fall on that star scale, we'd love to see what you think. And if you have a few extra seconds, go ahead and leave us a review as well. We would really appreciate that. All right. Well, how about we dive into today's episode?
As we're releasing this episode, it's only 3 days before Christmas of 2020.
Yeah.
Here we go. And it might be fun to talk about all the warm, fuzzy, and festive things associated with the season, or even give you an exciting review of our favorite holiday movie. That would be fun, right? And just keep things light and lovely. I mean, this is where we all want to focus, right?
Yeah, really.
That's where we want to be, on enjoying family fun experiences, and we want to enjoy lots of connection and happy memories. However, we're not sure that focusing there would bring practical help to those who might be struggling, right? Or for those who are anticipating a difficult Christmas this year.
Sure.
And the holidays can be a very challenging time for blended families, as we very well know.
Yeah, that's right. The first Christmas after we were married, I was super excited. Your daughter, my stepdaughter Annika, was 6 years old at the time, and we had only been married for about 9 months. So we hadn't really been blending our family that long yet. And since I didn't bring any kids into our marriage, this was going to be my first Christmas feeling kind of like a dad. Now, I mean, I was stepdad, but it felt that way. I couldn't wait. I remember Annika setting out the Christmas cookies on Christmas Eve for Santa to eat, and her anticipation as we put her down to bed, right?
Yep.
I knew all the things that would be waiting for her under the tree the next morning, and I was expecting this kind of picture-perfect family Christmas the next morning. Well, we did have a pretty good morning, diving into presents and listening to Christmas music and generally having a pretty great time. And honey, you grew up with this tradition in your family of fixing waffles with strawberries and whipped cream on Christmas morning, right?
That's my tradition.
And so we were planning on that. We decided we were going to keep that tradition going. And so after we were all done at the tree, we said, let's go make some breakfast. And then the reality sunk in. It was the fit to end all fits.
Oh, yeah. The big tantrum.
That's right. For some reason that we'll probably never know, the sweet little 6-year-old girl who I was having so much fun with, she'd just gotten everything she could possibly want for Christmas. And she stood there defiantly in the middle of the kitchen, absolutely refusing to take part in this carefully planned family breakfast that we were working out, right? And by the time this fit was over, Annika had stormed off to her bedroom. Kim was in the kitchen at the table in tears. It seemed like Christmas had come to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
This was a huge, major disappointment for me. I was stunned. I had absolutely no idea how to respond. I was disappointed in Annika. I expected a different reaction from her that morning.
Sure.
I was disappointed in Kim. Yeah. I thought that she was going to be able to handle, Annika's outbursts and that kind of stuff and resolve the issue. And I felt kind of disappointed in myself. Like I couldn't fix this issue. And I had some really unrealistic expectations that I wasn't aware of at that point in the journey, but they were real. Yeah. And I just wasn't equipped to cope with this reality and these disappointments around Christmas time.
Yeah. And that was 19 years ago. And since then, we've been navigating all kinds of holiday seasons together. And, some have been relatively stress-free and really wonderful. Others, though, have been not that great.
That's one way to put it.
Especially during the 3 years that we found ourselves in family court, battling it out with my ex. During that time, the holidays were filled with painful negotiations around the schedule and ugly ongoing conflict that felt like we were living in a war zone. There was no peace, and the joy was often sucked out of our family's holiday experience.
That's right.
And it was Annika who was stuck in the crossfire of all of that.
That's right.
Many times I found myself overwhelmed and unprepared to handle her difficult emotions. During a time that we were supposed to be connecting and enjoying our family, she was experiencing a variety of disappointments. And, I didn't always know how to respond to that, especially as my own emotions were raw and I was dealing with quite a few disappointments of my own.
Yeah, we've certainly had holiday ups and downs, and we know we're not the only ones. So for this episode, we're going to explore some things that many of us would probably prefer not to talk about 3 days before Christmas. But if we want to be able to show up well in our blended family during the holidays, especially when tension pops up and maybe the kids are struggling, then we need to get some ideas on how we're going to support the kids and the stepkids when they're experiencing emotions like disappointment. Okay, now let's be clear. This isn't disappointment because they didn't get what they were expecting under the tree. We're talking about the confusion or the resentment or the sadness or even anger that they might be struggling with as they navigate the stresses of blended family dynamics that can sometimes be amplified for them around the holidays. Yeah. You want to be equipped so that you can respond to the kids in a way that's going to help them discover that they can actually manage their own emotions as they navigate their disappointments in the coming week and really all year.
Yeah. And we're also going to touch on managing our own painful emotions that can get triggered when our kids express their difficult and troubling emotions.
Right. So that's where we're headed today. And we know it might not be whimsical and festive and that type of conversation that you'd like to hear right before Christmas. But one of the things we really want to do on this podcast is confront realities and do that in a way that can bring some hope. Yes. So even as we're leading up to these festivities, we'll talk about the tough stuff while inspiring some hope, because there's always hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's dive in. It's hard to know how to respond when your kids struggle through tough emotions. None of us want to see our kids experiencing pain, but the reality is that most kids experience disappointment and sadness all the way through the process of getting where you are today. The divorce or the loss of a parent was hard, and for a lot of kids, when their parents recouple and bring a step-parent into the picture, it can create more troubling emotions for them. They've had to accept new family structures, changing dynamics, new relationships, and new responsibilities. And all of that comes with managing and accepting unwanted changes in complex relationships that are challenging for them to even understand, let alone handle well, right?
Definitely.
And things like the holidays, when their energy and attention has to be divided between two homes, can sometimes increase their discomfort and disappointment. It's a time when emotions can be really magnified, and that's hard for us as parents and step-parents to fully understand. We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge?
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
So I remember being gripped with this uneasy and heavy feeling when Annika battled through confusion and painful emotions that seemed to consume her sometimes. And in these moments, I had a battle of my own going on. I was worried about her, but I also had concerns about if, when, and how I should approach her. I wasn't sure how to show up. And of course, I struggled with some guilt because I felt responsible for some of her pain because my choices are what led our family to this place of confusion and angst. And maybe you're struggling with guilt as well. And we don't have time to go into that today, but if you're feeling guilt like I did, you might want to go check out a blog article that I wrote on how to move beyond painful guilt and regret. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. So Mike just shared about our first Christmas together. And, at that time, I was not confident I would have the courage or the skill to actually help my daughter with her emotions. I wrestled with feelings of inadequacy, not knowing if I'd be able to connect with her or even really understand her struggle. My own natural instinct was to protect my daughter from her pain by either distracting her or kind of attempting to paint a silver lining around all of these difficult circumstances that were going on in her life. I found myself saying, at least a lot,
Yeah.
At least you'll get to come back to our house next week, or at least you get to celebrate 2 Christmases. It was especially hard for me when she missed out on something fun going on at our house while she was at her dad's. Again, I'd try to put a happy spin on her disappointment. At least we brought you a candy cane from the Christmas parade that she missed out on, right?
Yeah.
But eventually, I realized that grasping for an easy fix wasn't really helping. And the reality is, there are no easy fixes for kids that are coping with the disappointments that can come with blended family dynamics and all the realities that really aren't going to change. Realities they never ask for that often stir up challenging emotions that they aren't equipped to handle. At one point, I think my daughter was around 7 or 8, and she was dealing with a lot of conflicting emotions when within a few years, she became a big sister to 5 half-siblings in 2 homes. Yeah, and it was a lot for her to cope with emotionally, especially around the holidays when both families were establishing new traditions with new babies, and Annika was moving back and forth, feeling confusion and sadness that she was always missing someone.
And she was the only one moving back
She
and
was,
forth.
yeah. Now, around that time, I finally understood that the best thing I could do for her was to enter into her painful reality. No matter how unprepared or emotionally fragile I was feeling, and this hasn't always been easy. But when I mustered up the courage to come alongside her in the struggle, it was always worth it and beneficial.
Yeah, that's a hard thing, but it's really important because sometimes slowing ourselves down long enough to enter into the kid's experience is actually the fastest way to move forward.
Absolutely.
And we're going to explore some practical ways that you can do just that. But first, let's touch on some reasons why this kind of open communication Kim is talking about is invaluable for your kids. And really for your relationship with them. So we need to start by understanding that when we get in the habit of avoiding or trying to quickly eliminate difficult emotions for our kids, it usually only makes the emotions stronger and more difficult in the end. So instead, we need to learn to be curious about them and spend some time with their emotions. if we want to manage them effectively.
And help them to manage them.
That's right. So we want to try to adopt the mindset that just because something feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. Tough emotions aren't bad, and experiencing them is just a natural and normal part of being human. So by creating a safe space for kids to verbally process their emotions, we're actually able to help build a bridge of connection with them, and we understand our child better. It actually deepens the relationship to process these difficult emotions together. Now, when we avoid the difficult conversations and we don't allow kids to express negative emotions, we're essentially putting up walls, and we're sending messages like, your emotions aren't okay and I'm not available to help you. You're on your own to figure all this confusing stuff out. Now, I hope you pull yourself together, right? That's kind of the message we might be sending when we avoid all this. And over time, this will usually lead to kids that withdraw, feel alone, maybe even believe there's something wrong with them. Instead, we want to let the kids know that it's okay to feel however they're feeling, and you're there for them. We all need to learn to feel and process through emotional ups and downs all throughout life.
Yeah.
And as a parent and a step-parent, this is an opportunity for us to grow closer in relationship and to better understand our kids and stepkids.
Absolutely. And engaging in open dialogue with kids helps them to move through their difficult emotions. I love this simple phrase: feel, deal, and heal.
Nice.
Kids do feel, and they can easily get stuck in painful cycles of confusion, anger, fear, even depression if they aren't able to express and cope with their emotions in a healthy way. And by really listening and empathizing with our kids and stepkids, we can help them work through their troubling emotions, help them to deal and move forward towards healing and acceptance. So that they don't stay stuck or continue in self-destructive and unproductive behaviors that often crop up, right?
That's right.
Now, this ability to empathize is essential in blended family life. We all need to continually be putting ourselves into our kids' shoes to gain insight and understanding. And if you struggle with feeling empathy toward your child or your stepchild, especially when they're acting out, right? It's hard to empathize. We've put a link in the show notes to a blog article called Empathy or Avoidance. Which do you choose?
Yeah.
So check that one out if you'd like to raise your empathy skills up a notch. It's a critical skill for everyone. We all need to understand that empathy is different than comfort. Most of us are naturally wired to offer our kids lots of comfort when they're hurting. But sometimes our comforting attempts are borderline distractions, right? Saying something like, oh, honey, let me give you a big hug and give you a homemade cookie, right?
Yum.
So before we move into comforting our kids, we want to offer some emotional support. That's the goal. Now, in his article, How to Raise Emotionally Resilient Kids, clinical psychologist Nick Wingall says this: the key to emotional resilience is the ability to acknowledge and validate emotions instead of judging or running away from them. And you can help your kids learn to do that by validating their difficult feelings. The more you practice doing this with them, the more likely they will be able to do it for themselves in the future. So empathy is more about acknowledging and validating the kids through their tough emotions as opposed to simply comforting them. This is an important distinction, and we'll put a link to Nick's article in the show notes so you can learn more.
Yeah, definitely. And what's most important in the long run is that your kids learn how to explore their own solutions and discover practical ways to cope with their own stress. They do need your help to master this skill. You may not be able to fix or change the realities of their blended family dynamics, but you definitely can encourage them to find new ways to make things a little bit better emotionally. And you don't have to be a counselor or a psychologist to do this. No. You might even feel like you're just not good at all this stuff, right? We hear that from lots of different parents. But the truth is, you can support the kids as they learn to accept those things that aren't going to change and offer some new possibilities for them in how to live well, even in the tension of these challenging dynamics. Now, I know this because all the things that we're talking about today are skills, not just traits. It's not that you either have it or you don't. It means that just because you may not be the best at empathizing with the kids today doesn't mean you can't learn to get better. You've got what it takes to help them brainstorm and explore what they can do to cope and make healthy adjustments through the holidays and through life. And you can learn to practice empathy skills, and you can make a difference for your kids. One thing I like to say is that you don't need to be perfect for your kids. You need to be present. Yeah. Any parent or step-parent can grow in this area. Now, those are just a few reasons why we should enter into the painful moments of our kids' emotion rather than trying to avoid or distract. And what we're suggesting is that every parent can master this. This is a communication skill that all of us can learn and practice. And it can make a huge difference for you and for the kids. And it's a skill that we've had to work hard at learning over the years ourselves. But I'll tell you what, it's been worth all the effort.
Yes, absolutely. Probably the most effective training that I received around all of this that really gave me confidence and skill as a parent was a book called Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child by John Gottman.
Yeah, you've heard this from us before if you've been listening
We love
at all.
this book. And it's really not as complicated as it sounds. It's just 5 simple steps that can guide a parent, any parent, as they help their kids process difficult emotions. And I wrote a blog article a while back that outlined these 5 steps, and it was kind of an overview of the book. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes. So you have the 5 steps there and handy to use, but we highly recommend you read this book. Now, to help you navigate these next few days leading up to the Christmas holiday, we're going to explore one difficult situation that a child in a blended family might experience on or around Christmas. And then we're going to apply Gottman's 5 steps just to walk through an example today.
Yes, that's right. So let's start with the first step. That's a good place to start, right? The first step to coaching our kids around their emotions is really about awareness and listening. It all starts with that empathy we were just talking about, because Gottman says empathy is the foundation of emotion coaching. You know, most kids in blended families struggle with 2 primary things, loyalty and loss. And these are 2 issues that often trigger painful emotions for them, and they can be amplified around special occasions. So we want to put our empathy skills to work by putting some effort into understanding what this really means for our kids. It doesn't matter how long it's been since the divorce or the remarriage has occurred, there can still be lingering loss for kids because spending time with one parent means not being with the other. This can also trigger loyalty issues. A child might be unable to relax and enjoy one home if they believe that it's going to negatively impact the parent in the other home. And so we've got to be sensitive to these losses and the possibility of loyalty binds and realize that these mixed reactions are really common for blended family kids. So we're going to put a link to the show notes for episode 29 if you think that your child might be stuck in one of these loyalty binds and you might be wondering how you're going to approach that. But here's a simple example, one that our daughter Annika struggled with on more than one occasion, really. But we'll wrap it around an actual year that we experienced. She had just transitioned to our house late Christmas morning after spending Christmas Eve and near early morning with her dad. And we'd been waiting for her arrival, and we were excited to see her and to get our celebration started. But Annika showed up acting pretty sullen and kind of sulky. We noticed that she was tearful as she said goodbye to her dad at the door, and she just wasn't her usual peppy self. Her posture was slouched, and there were clear signs of stress.
Yeah. So what's a parent to do, right? In that moment, Mike and our 2 mutual kids have been waiting patiently for Annika to arrive, and there's Christmas magic in the air for them. But I'm very aware that Annika's in a different place. And of course, I start to feel like the trapped teammate, and I'm suddenly feeling anxious. And honestly, I was tempted to simply ignore Annika's funky attitude and just push forward with the day's activities, let her figure it out, and hope that she warms up
just
soon.
Get over it and let's move forward.
Yeah, exactly. But like we discussed just a few moments ago, avoidance or distraction isn't really going to help her. So what do? Well, let's move on to step 2, which is to examine your own mindset about your child's emotions. Sometimes we want to avoid these conversations with our kids because it's painful to see them hurting or we feel inadequate, or it could trigger some guilt. But what we really want is to recognize that this is an opportunity to build intimacy with our child and an opportunity to coach them around how to process any difficult emotions and how to self-regulate, which is an important life skill. And we're going to touch a little bit more on step 2 in just a minute.
That's right. But before we get there, we're just a quick recap. We're aware that Annika's struggling. Okay, that awareness is step 1. And then we're examining your own mindset and recognizing that there's an opportunity to come alongside and help her. Yeah. Then we want to move to step 3, which is to validate our child. And we're going to do this by using what we hear and observe, and then by using questions to engage in a conversation. So think about how you might be able to ask a question to the child to open up what's really going on. Something like this. Hey, it seems like you're feeling a little down today. Would you be willing to tell me about that? And let's just say that Annika replies to Kim with something like, well, I was having a lot of fun at Daddy's and I was playing with our new toys and stuff. And the younger kids were upset when I had to leave. Now, the goal here is to use validating words to reflect back what you're hearing and connect with the child on a heart-to-heart level. So Kim could have responded to Annika with something like, so what I hear you saying is that you were enjoying your Christmas celebration with your dad's family and you were disappointed because it was cut short. Is that right? You see, engaging kids in this open dialogue, it's much more effective than applying our adult logic or jumping into fix-it mode with those at least statements, right?
Yeah. And when your child shares what's really going on for them, it can be hard if that, triggers some painful emotions for you.
Oh, so now we got to go back to step 2, right? Examine your own mindset.
In this example, which was a real emotion for me in this situation, when she stated that, I felt jealous and fearful and even a bit threatened. I jumped to an assumption that she enjoyed her dad's home more than ours and maybe even loved them more.
Yeah, that's a big assumption.
I started the comparison trap. Yeah. And this is where most of us get tripped up. We have to make a conscious decision on how we're going to respond in that moment. Are we going to react out of our own pain? Or are we going to attend to our child's pain?
That's a good question.
You really can't do both in the moment. What I had to learn to do was to set my own painful emotions aside so that I could help Annika process hers. And this is where step 2 is so important. What is my mindset and how can I best respond? And, don't get me wrong here. I'm not in any way suggesting that we just bury our own emotions.
Right.
Okay. My feelings in that moment were valid, just as valid as my daughter's. We were both hurting. We each had our own unique perspective. So even though I put my emotions aside to help Annika work through hers, later that day, I acknowledged my own struggles, and that's so important that we're doing. I acknowledged them not just to myself, but also to Mike, and we processed through my difficult emotions when Annika was not around.
Right, exactly.
So it's important to do that. But in the heat of that emotionally charged moment, we need to remember that it isn't helpful to purge out our own hurts onto our hurting child or stepchild. In fact, this will almost always shut them down. It will backfire. And the truth is that we're the adults and we have more experience and maturity in handling these temporary setting our pain aside moments in order to show up well for our kids who haven't developed that kind of maturity. We can do that. And while it might be true that what they share is hurtful to you, try to keep in mind that the situation they're struggling to cope with is not their fault, and it's just not easy. So do your best to not get hung up in the moment by your own emotions, but to stay focused on helping your child work through theirs. And then be sure to circle back around and work through your own emotions in a healthy way later on.
Yeah, that's right. And what kids really need in that emotionally charged moment is to be affirmed in their feelings. They need a parent or a step-parent who's going to offer a safe space for sharing and who doesn't dismiss or sometimes inadvertently disapprove of their emotions. When children experience this, they feel comforted and they get to see that this adult is a confidant who understands them. And that alone can relieve a lot of the struggle.
Yeah.
And it's important to make the distinction that just because you're empathizing and validating the child's feelings does not mean that you're necessarily agreeing with their perspective or the details about what they see in the circumstances. Notice the response Kim suggested was, so what I'm hearing is that you, right? She's focused on the child. It's simply repeating back what you heard from the child, whether that be verbatim or even paraphrased. But using this kind of response is not necessarily agreement. Making that distinction in your own mind can help you from getting stuck in your difficult emotions as well.
Absolutely.
So, honey, let's say that you validated, like you just said a moment ago, and then Annika responds with something like, yeah, I'm sad that I had to leave when we were having fun.
Yeah.
Well, what might be an empathetic, affirming response in that moment, even though you might be challenged by your own emotions?
Well, a helpful response would be something like, oh, honey, I can understand how hard that was for you, and I'm sorry the kids were upset about you leaving. I'm glad you had such a great morning at your dad's. What was the best part of the morning for you? And then I would just let her talk. And I'd listen closely for clues around what specific emotions she might be experiencing in that moment. And I'd simply continue to ask questions and listen.
Yeah, that's great.
I love this quote. Knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens. Listening to really hear and understand our kids is not only a wise approach to parenting, but we can also gain wisdom about who they are when we're willing to listen to their hearts.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, honestly, I didn't always get this right.
None of us do.
Back to our very first Christmas together and the epic tantrum around having strawberry waffles for breakfast. Honestly, I had no idea at the time how to respond or what was going on. And it might have just been a 6-year-old objecting to what we were serving and had nothing to do with blended family dynamics.
That's true.
Or there could have been something else going on as well, since we were rapidly approaching transition time with her dad. But over the years, as I've learned the skill of emotion coaching and I've practiced it, it became more and more natural. And I was able to connect with Annika on a whole new level, even to this day.
Yeah, you've gotten really good at that.
But I will add, validating a child's emotions isn't always easy. Simply because they're kids and their developmental maturity and their understanding is very limited, right? Kids often express their emotions indirectly and in ways that adults don't get. It's puzzling for us sometimes. You know, a tantrum can mean more than just a child wanting to get their way. But if we're willing to watch and listen carefully, we can often decode messages that tend to be hidden in our kids' behaviors. And this reminds me of a great illustration around this. A couple we know at their wedding. It was their wedding day, and they each had their kids there. And, you know, they had great expectations that the kids were going to behave really well and be excited. Yeah. So they were so excited to get their wedding photos back, and they had taken lots of family photos. And in every single photo, one of the kids, one of his sons, had this really sad face. Every single photo.
Yeah.
And that was his way of expressing emotion. He couldn't go to his dad and tell him what he was feeling. So his way of dealing with it was to pull this awful face in every single photo. So we need to understand that they are not mature. They don't express themselves the same way we do. We've heard this quote from Mark Gregston. Behavior is the visible expression of invisible issues. It's the warning light on the dashboard.
That's right. That's right.
You know, most of the time, children really do have valid reasons for their behavior, but it can be hard for them to articulate what they're feeling. Instead, they'll act out. And that's exactly why they need our help. They really do. So if we're able to step back and look at the bigger picture of what really is going on under the surface, what's happening on that dashboard behind the behavior, and then validate their experience, even when we don't agree with it or understand it,
that's important.
we can open up valuable opportunities to gain insight into their world.
That's right. Okay, so step 1 is awareness and listening. Step 2 is examining your own mindset. Step 3 is to validate the child's experience, some of those questions that we're asking them. And then step 4 is to help your child verbally label their emotion. Studies show that the act of just simply naming or labeling emotions can have a soothing effect on the nervous system, and it helps kids to recover more quickly from upsetting incidences. It's best when kids can use precise words to express their feelings. So see if you can help them hit the nail on the head and find a specific label for their emotion. Now, this can be challenging for our kids because often they're struggling with mixed emotions. The week leading up to Christmas, Annika had been excited and really looking forward to celebrating with both families. But when she was faced with the difficult reality of the transition time, she was flooded with some probably unexpected feelings. When our kids seem confused and they struggle with a variety of conflicting emotions, we can help them to identify the positive and the negative emotions that they're experiencing. So rather than trying to tell our kids how they ought to feel, we want to train them in developing a vocabulary to express how they really feel.
Yes.
Mixed emotions can be confusing and troubling to kids. So sorting through them can help just to release some of the pain as they process.
Yeah. When Annika was young, she had a poster in her room that had a bunch of cute little animals and children, and each character on the poster had a really different expression on its face, very different. And each one clearly expressed a specific emotion, and each emotion was labeled under the faces.
That's right.
So when I noticed that Annika was struggling, I'd sit with her in front of the poster and ask her to point out each one that expressed how she was feeling in that moment. And this helped to train her to not only identify her emotions, but to accept that it was okay to have emotions.
That's good.
The poster had positive and negative emotions, everything from disappointed to loved. Now, for our example story with Annika on Christmas Day, I was able to help her identify and label all of her mixed feelings that she was experiencing. She was feeling sad about having to leave her dad's house and disappointed she'd miss out on the fun that they were having. She was feeling sorry that her siblings in that home were missing her. But she was also feeling curious about all the presents under our tree and excited to spend time with our family too.
That's a lot of conflict in there. Yeah.
No wonder she was sullen. And by the way, we'll put a link in the show notes to that poster that was created by Jody Bergsna, just in case you're interested. It's called Garden of Children. But that's not the only one out there. There are lots and lots of resources like this available on the internet to really help kids to identify and label their emotions. Now, if you have a child that's not verbalizing much, that's kind of shut down, using a poster like this and then asking validating questions is a good way to draw them out, especially when they realize you are a safe person to talk to. So when you do this, you can point out an emotion and say something like, "It seems like you're feeling a bit confused, like this little guy on the poster. Is that right? Or is there another one that you're feeling more like?" Then you just let your child sit for a moment and they can either confirm, "Yes, I'm feeling really confused," or they can correct you. "Actually, no, I'm feeling hurt," and point to the hurt character on the poster. Then you can continue drawing them out. "I'd like to know more about why you're feeling hurt." This is a great way to continue the conversation and help your child to process through their emotions.
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks for sharing that. I remember that poster. We got a lot of use out of that poster. Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the final step, which is helping the child problem solve while we're setting limits if that's necessary. Sometimes when kids are expressing negative emotions like anger, they can act out behaviorally too. And if that's the case, it might be necessary to set some limits around inappropriate behaviors, things like hurting themselves or others or being destructive to property, things like that. And, it's important for kids to know that their feelings are not the problem, but their misbehavior is. The child should understand that they have a right to their feelings, but they have to find some healthier ways to express those feelings. And you can help with that. We've done lots of different things over the years. When our youngest was Jacob, when he was young, he used to get really angry. He would slam doors, he would stomp around, he'd hit stuff, all kinds of things. One little thing that we did was we got him one of those inflatable punching bags, with the little sand thing at the bottom, and it would like bounce back up and like hit you in the face. Of course, sometimes that makes you even madder. But he would, use that to pound it and kind of get his anger released on that and calm down. And then we would be able to talk him through it. Often when kids in a blended family are struggling emotionally, they will lash out. They might become physically aggressive or just disrespectful. And the bio parent at that point needs to set a limit around unhealthy behavior. Something like, hey, I can see you're upset, and I know this has been hard for you, but it's not okay to treat others with disrespect. And once you've set appropriate limits, you can help the child then identify a way to solve their own problem, which is really what step 5 is all about. Now, this isn't about a quick fix or distracting them. Like we said before, it's not trying to just, hey, let's do something fun. It's about helping them explore a next step that they can take, either a tangible step or an emotionally regulating step. And here's the most important thing. You're not solving this for them by trying to throw out your own suggestions. You're going to encourage the child to come up with their own ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big challenge here is that you're helping them work through tough realities that really can't be changed. Annika's dad and I will stay divorced, and her time will always be split between 2 homes. The holidays can still be challenging for her to navigate, even as an adult now, and they might always be a challenging time for her. That reality isn't going to change. But I can help her to problem solve by asking questions like, what do you think might help in this situation? And get her thinking. In her frustration, she might say something like, well, if I didn't have to move between 2 homes all the time, that would help.
Yeah, for sure.
And if that happens, it's okay. Validate again. Honey, I know this is hard, and it isn't easy to have family connections in 2 different places. And then ask again. What's one thing you can do that'll help make something a little better? You really want to encourage your child to brainstorm their own ideas. I know that Mike just said that you're not giving them the ideas, but if they get really stuck, it's okay to ask if you can offer a suggestion. But before you do, simply ask permission by saying something like, is it okay if I share an idea with you? When you ask permission and they grant that, you're actually opening up a little part of their brain that receives input, which can help them hear you better. Then you can say something like, well, I'm wondering if it would be helpful for you to have a little alone time and listen to your favorite music before we start with our Christmas celebration.
Yeah.
Some kids need that. They need a little break in between transitions. Or maybe I would say, when we're done opening our presents, would it be helpful for you to call over to the other house and just connect with the other kids for a bit? So help your child to find some next steps that'll ease their struggle a bit. It's this balance of accepting realities they may not like and cannot change, while at the same time processing through negative emotions in a way that's healthy and looking for some possible next step solutions. This is different than going into fix-it mode or just trying to distract them from their difficult emotions.
That's right. Yep.
You're walking them through a process. Now, if there isn't a tangible solution to their problem, that's okay. By using these emotion coaching skills, you're still helping your child process their emotions and learn to self-regulate when things aren't going the way they'd like, which is a skill that will serve them very well in life. We all have to learn this. And if this is the case and there are no tangible solutions, you can simply say something like, honey, thanks for sharing this with me. I'm so glad that you can be honest with me about what you're feeling. What do you think we should do right now?
Yeah, that's good.
And remember, many of the emotions our kids tend to struggle with are not going to be resolved with only one conversation.
Yeah, it's not one and done.
especially when their emotions are connected to loss and loyalty. You'll need to be ready to offer ongoing support as difficult emotions get triggered again and again for your kids.
Yeah, that's right. So those are 5 steps to emotion coaching and really helping your kids to cope with these painful holiday disappointments that they might be running into. And really any other emotion that'll come in the new year and beyond. So let's just do a quick recap. Step 1 is to have awareness and to listen even to those nonverbal cues that tell you that your child might be struggling emotionally. Step 2 is examining your own mindset, which also means that you might need to put your own emotions aside just temporarily as you help the child to process their emotions. Step 3, validate the child's emotion by asking good questions and engaging in a meaningful conversation. Step 4, help your child identify and label their emotions verbally. And remember, they might be mixed and confusing. They might have some good and bad emotions at the same time. That's great. Yeah, sort that out. And then finally, step 5, help your child to brainstorm and problem solve. And don't forget to set appropriate limits if you need to. And of course, we can use these 5 steps anytime. Our kids won't just struggle through the holidays. There will be many opportunities to come alongside your kids and to help them process through the challenges of blended family life. And really, it's not just around blended family dynamics either, but also the normal challenges of childhood and the teen years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to leave you on a hopeful note today, and it's from John Gottman, who wrote the book. And he states this: when parents are present for their kids emotionally, helping them to cope with negative feelings and guiding them through rough periods of family stress, their children are shielded from many of the damaging effects of divorce. And, you know, I would add that this also applies to kids navigating through step-family dynamics, right? I mean, it just goes on and on for them.
Sure.
Gottman also says that when we're able to emotion coach well, our kids will have fewer behavioral problems and will be better able to recover from distressing experiences. Through this process, kids develop an emotional intelligence that will prepare them to handle the challenging emotions they'll face throughout life. Isn't that great news?
Yeah. So hold on to that truth for inspiration and some motivation as you and your kids navigate through the challenging emotions this Christmas and into the new year, which we're all hoping 2021 might bring a little bit more joy, right? Now, you can do all of this.
You can.
And remember that we're here to help you if you need some help.
Absolutely.
And in fact, we're going to even talk about some more. You know, I see this as really bonding as we learn how to do this well with our kids. And next week, we're going to talk about even more bonding and some really great strategies around how you can bond not only with your bio kids, that's right, but also with your step kids.
Yes.
So we're excited about that and looking forward to meeting you back here next week. And don't forget to hit subscribe, leave us a rating and review. And if you're catching this episode at the time of release, we wish you a really happy holiday season this 2020. And that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.